Vertical navigation, or VNAV, uses a group of FMC functions to control the airspeed and the vertical path of the airplane during all phases of flight. There are 3 VNAV pages. You use them to set the airspeed and altitude for the related phase of flight. The airspeed and altitude for each waypoint is shown on the right side of the legs page. The FMC uses the airplane's present position, the flight plan route, and wind data to calculate pitch, roll, and thrust commands. The commands let you fly an efficient flight profile. From the airplane data and ATC restrictions in the FMC, the vertical flight profile can be shown on the ND. VNAV operation changes as the airplane moves to a new phase of flight. The phases of flight we will talk about are takeoff, climb, cruise, descent, and approach. Each phase starts and ends at specified points. When the airplane is at the end of one phase, the subsequent phase starts automatically. The takeoff phase extends from when takeoff thrust is set to the thrust reduction point, where thrust is decreased for the climb. The climb phase extends from the thrust reduction point to the top of climb, and also includes periods of level flight before the airplane is at cruise altitude. The cruise phase starts when the airplane is at the top of climb and ends at the top of descent. The descent phase extends from the top of descent point until the flaps are out of up, or until the active waypoint is part of an instrument approach, or until you are less than 25 miles from the runway on part of a visual approach. The approach phase continues until the airplane lands, go-around is selected, or you fly past the last waypoint in the route. When you use VNAV, you must monitor the flight mode annunciations and know which phase of flight you are in. This is because the same FMA can show during different phases. When VNAV is engaged, you must use data from different displays to monitor airplane performance. Monitor the VNAV page for the current phase of flight. Examine the legs page to verify target speeds and altitudes at each waypoint. Use the VSD to see the VNAV profile. The VSD shows the same data that is on the legs page. The VNAV indications on the PFD are current and target airspeed, current and target altitude, pitch mode, and thrust mode. Use the PAVE procedure to enter constraints for the vertical profile. VNAV lets you plan the vertical profile for each phase of flight. Once you have a plan, access the necessary CDU pages. Enter airspeed and altitude data for the correct waypoints. You can also enter wind information to help VNAV plan a more accurate path. When necessary, other data can be entered on the VNAV climb and cruise pages. These will be talked about later. And last, always verify that the correct mode is engaged and that the target airspeed and altitude are correct. A number of CDU pages are directly related to the phases of flight. There are 2 types of pages we will talk about: reference and VNAV. You have used the takeoff reference page to set the takeoff V speeds. The approach reference page is where you set the landing reference speed. There is a VNAV page for each phase of flight from climb to descent. ACT or active shows in the title of the VNAV page that is related to the current phase of flight. The VNAV key shows the VNAV page for the current phase of flight. In this example, it is climb. To show a different VNAV page, use the next page or previous page key. Select the keys to show all three VNAV pages. It is important to show the correct VNAV page in the flight deck for the current phase of flight. The takeoff phase starts when you push a takeoff go-around switch and ends when the FMC commands climb thrust at the thrust reduction point. The takeoff reference page shows V-speed targets after the IRS is aligned and the FMC pre-flight procedure is complete. Takeoff reference page 2 shows the first part of the climb profile in the acceleration height and thrust reduction fields. The climb phase starts when thrust is decreased after takeoff. During climb, VNAV operates in the VNAV speed mode and uses pitch to control airspeed. You use the VNAV climb page to monitor and change the climb data as necessary. Use the VNAV key to access the climb page. Data shown on the climb page comes from pre-flight entries you made on the route and performance pages. The active Econ climb page shows the cruise altitude, the FMC calculated economy speed or an MCP selected speed, and the next waypoint constraint from the legs page. The other data fields will be talked about in a different lesson. The selected airspeed and altitude targets on the PFD can be verified on the VNAV climb page. The cruise phase starts at the top of climb point at the VNAV cruise altitude. During cruise, VNAV operates in the VNAV path mode and uses thrust to control airspeed. When the FMC changes to the cruise phase, the VNAV page automatically changes from climb to cruise. The active Econ cruise page shows the cruise altitude, the economy speed, or the selected speed, and other data fields that will be talked about in a different lesson. The descent phase starts when the airplane is at the top of descent point. The FMC calculates a descent path from the top of descent to the end of descent points. At the top of descent point, thrust is automatically adjusted for the VNAV descent. The airplane's pitch controls the airspeed. The target altitude you set will be the same as the next altitude constraint on the descent path. During descent, VNAV usually operates in the VNAV path mode. If it cannot control the airplane to stay on the planned path, the pitch mode will change to VNAV speed. You are now in the descent. Select the VNAV key to show the descent page. You use the descent page to monitor the descent and to change the vertical profile as necessary. The active Econ descent page shows the end of descent point, the Econ speed, or the selected speed, and other data fields that will be talked about in a different lesson. The waypoints shown on the VSD are the same as the waypoints on the legs page. These tools help you stay on the vertical path. The approach phase starts when the flaps move out of the up position, but you usually prepare for the approach before the top of descent point. The init ref key lets you directly access the approach reference page when the airplane is in the cruise or descent phase. Show the approach reference page. The FMC uses the airplane's gross weight to calculate the landing reference speeds for 3 landing flap settings. After you verify the speed is correct for your landing flap setting, you enter the values into the flap speed data field. The values then show on the PFD. With the airplane in the climb phase, access the Econ Cruise page. Continue.